The twin suns of Valoran rose slowly over the crystal spires of the royal city. Their light shimmered across golden towers and wide silver bridges that stretched like veins through the heart of the empire. Every street was lined with banners showing the mark of Queen Elira, ruler of the Valoran Dominion, one of the most advanced and powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Today was a day unlike any other. It was the day their queen would marry a human. The people of Valoran were tall and graceful, with luminous skin and eyes that glowed faintly when touched by sunlight. To them, humans were short-lived creatures from a distant blue world, a young race still learning how to walk among the stars. Many in the Empire believed this union was a mistake. They whispered that the Queen had been forced into it by the Galactic Council, which wished to keep peace between the Dominion and the Human Alliance. But the Queen did not show hesitation. She stood tall in her hall, her silver robes flowing like water, her eyes calm and sharp. She had made the decision herself, though few believed it. War had cost her too much. Peace, even through marriage, was better than endless destruction. When the human ship finally entered the royal docking bay, the crowd fell silent. From the glowing ramp stepped a man who looked ordinary by every alien measure. He was of average height, with dark hair and clear brown eyes. His name was Mark Hale, an engineer from Earth, chosen not for his power or title but for his mind and character. He bowed respectfully before the Queen, his movements simple but filled with quiet confidence. For a long moment the Queen and the human looked at one another. Around them whispers rippled through the air. The alien nobles standing behind the Queen could not hide their disbelief. They expected a warrior, a general, perhaps even a political leader. Instead, a soft-spoken engineer had come to marry their sovereign. Queen Elira's voice echoed gently through the hall. "You are far from home, Mark of Earth. Do you understand what this union means?" Mark raised his head, meeting her gaze without fear. "I do, Your Majesty. It means trust between our worlds. It means peace worth protecting." His words were simple, yet they carried weight. Something in his tone made Elira pause. There was no pride, no trembling, only calm strength. She nodded slowly and the ceremony began. The union was held in the Hall of Stars, a vast chamber whose glass ceiling showed the moving constellations above. The two placed their hands upon the Unity Stone, a living crystal that glowed when it sensed honesty. When Mark's hand touched it, the light turned bright white, a color that few had ever seen from the ancient artifact. The Valoran nobles exchanged uneasy looks. The stone recognized the human sincerity. After the ceremony, Elira walked beside Mark through the grand corridors of the palace. The air was filled with music from alien instruments, and guests from 100 worlds had gathered to celebrate. Yet she could feel the eyes of her people watching closely, measuring every step the human took. Mark's attention, however, was not on the stairs. He looked around in wonder. The palace walls shimmered like liquid crystal, and floating gardens hung from invisible fields of energy. "Your home is beautiful," he said softly. "It feels alive." "It is," Elira replied. "Our ancestors built it using organic metal that grows and heals itself. Every part of this palace remembers its builders." Mark smiled. "Then it has a good memory." His words made her smile faintly, though she quickly hid it. No one spoke to her so freely, not even her closest advisors. Most bowed, flattered, and obeyed. But this human spoke with gentle honesty, and for some reason she did not mind. As the day passed, Mark tried to learn from every person he met. He listened to the royal engineers describe their technology, asked questions about the strange crystals that powered the city, and even spoke kindly to the servants who brought food and water. Wherever he went, he showed patience and respect. Many of the aliens were surprised. They had expected arrogance or fear, but Mark showed neither. Still, not everyone was pleased. At the royal dinner, one of the high counselors, Lord Varen, decided to test the human. "Tell us, man of Earth," he said in a smooth but sharp tone, "what strength does your kind truly possess? You have no claws, no scales, no wings. Your body is fragile. What could you possibly offer our queen?" The hall fell silent. Elira's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. She wanted to see how her new husband would answer. Mark put down his glass and looked at Varen calmly. "You're right," he said. "We are fragile. Our world is dangerous and we break easily. But maybe that's why we learn to build, to think, and to keep standing when things fall apart. Strength doesn't always come from the body, Lord Varen. Sometimes it comes from never giving up. The hall remained silent for a few seconds. Then, to everyone's surprise, the Queen gave a small nod. "Well said," she murmured. That night, after the guests departed, the Queen led Mark to the royal garden. The air smelled of silver flowers that glowed faintly under the twin moons. The sound of water flowed through crystal fountains shaped like spirals. "You spoke wisely today," Elira said. "But you must understand, this court judges by power. Many will not respect words alone." "I don't expect them to," Mark replied. "Respect isn't given. It's earned." She studied him for a long moment. His posture was calm, but there was something deeper, an unshakable steadiness she could not define. "You speak like someone who has seen hardship," she said softly. Mark's gaze drifted toward the stars. "On Earth we all have. Our planet has storms, hunger, and mistakes that cost lives. But we keep moving forward. That's how we survived." The Queen said nothing. The garden wind brushed through the leaves, carrying a faint shimmer of light across his face. There was no pride in his words, no boasting, only quiet truth. Over the following days, Mark began to adapt to life in the palace. The alien language came quickly to him. His memory was sharp and his curiosity endless. He spent hours with the Valoran engineers, learning their methods and sometimes offering ideas from human science. Some of his suggestions improved the efficiency of their machines, surprising even the most skilled technicians. Slowly, whispers began to change. The nobles who had mocked him started watching with interest. They saw how carefully he worked, how patient he was even when others dismissed him. He did not argue or demand respect. He simply continued doing his best. One evening, Elira found him alone in the observatory, studying the stars. "You spend much time here," she said, stepping beside him. "I like seeing how big everything is," Mark replied with a small smile. "It reminds me that even if we're small, we can still make a difference." The Queen looked at him quietly. "You think peace is possible between our worlds?" "I believe it is," he said. "But it needs trust and time." She looked at him longer, her expression unreadable. "You speak with such faith in things unseen," she said finally. "Perhaps that is the real strength of humans." Mark smiled again, gentle and calm. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just hope." When she left that night, Elira could not stop thinking about his words. She had ruled for years, fought battles, and faced leaders who used strength as a weapon. But this man, this fragile, soft-spoken human, seemed to carry a kind of power she did not understand. And deep in her heart, for the first time in many years, the Queen of Valoran felt something she had not felt before: curiosity. Days turned into weeks, and the palace of Valoran continued to shine like a floating jewel above the blue clouds of the planet. From the outside, everything looked perfect, but inside the palace walls, tension quietly grew. The nobles had not accepted the human. Mark was polite and calm, always ready to learn, but to the Valoran courtiers, he was still an outsider. They whispered in the halls that the Queen had made a mistake by marrying him. Some even said she had been enchanted by human charm, a weak thing not fit for the throne. Queen Elira heard the whispers but showed no emotion. She had expected such talk. What she did not expect was how much the human seemed unaffected by it. Every morning, Mark walked the shining corridors with quiet focus. He spoke to the palace workers, asked about their tasks, and even helped fix broken tools in the gardens. When guards or servants thanked him, he simply smiled and said, "It's what I can do." The Queen often watched him from a distance. She could not understand why he spent time with the workers instead of enjoying royal comfort. The Valoran nobles saw manual work as something beneath royalty, but Mark seemed to enjoy it. One afternoon, Elira decided to ask him directly. She found him in the lower garden, kneeling beside a broken fountain. Water sprayed out from a crack in the crystal base, and Mark was using small tools to seal it. His sleeves were rolled up and his hands were wet. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. He looked up, surprised to see her. "It's leaking," he said simply. "If I can fix it, the water won't be wasted." "You have engineers who can handle such things," she said. "It is not your duty." Mark wiped his hands and smiled. "On Earth, when something breaks, we fix it ourselves if we can. Waiting for others doesn't always help." The Queen tilted her head slightly. "You find peace in such small work?" He nodded. "Sometimes fixing small things helps me understand the bigger ones." Elira did not reply, but for a moment she felt something strange, a quiet warmth in his words. She left him to his work, but the image of the human fixing a cracked fountain stayed with her for the rest of the day. A week later, the palace prepared for a grand council meeting. Leaders from several Valoran colonies had come to discuss trade and defense. The queen sat upon her crystal throne while the nobles filled the hall with bright robes and jeweled armor. Mark entered quietly, wearing a plain gray suit of human design. Compared to the shining uniforms of the alien lords, he looked almost invisible. Yet when he walked, his posture was steady, and his eyes were calm. During the meeting, Lord Varen, still the loudest voice against him, spoke sharply. "Your Majesty," he said, "this human may speak kindly, but he is not one of us. He does not understand our ways. How can he stand beside you in matters of state?" Mark did not interrupt. He listened quietly while the nobles nodded in agreement. Then when the queen gave him a small gesture to speak, he stood. "I do not ask to lead your people," Mark said softly. "I only ask to learn and to help where I can. But I do understand one thing: peace needs cooperation. And sometimes cooperation begins with listening." The hall went silent. His voice was not loud, but it carried through the room. The queen watched closely as he continued. "In my world, we've made many mistakes. We've fought, we've rebuilt, and we've learned. But if two worlds want to share peace, they must trust each other enough to start small." No one responded at first. The nobles looked uncertain. Some still frowned, but others began to think. His words did not sound political. They sounded human, simple, and true. After the meeting, Queen Elira walked beside him through the long corridor that led to the upper terraces. "You spoke well," she said. He smiled modestly. "I just told the truth." "You did more than that," she replied. "You made them quiet." "That is rare." He laughed softly. On Earth, making people quiet is usually a good sign. For the first time, the queen smiled openly. That evening, the queen invited him to the observatory garden, a private place where few were allowed. The garden floated above the city, its floor made of transparent glass that showed the glowing rivers below. Stars filled the sky, and a gentle wind carried the scent of silver blossoms. "You learn quickly," she said as they walked among the flowers. "I try," Mark replied. "Your people have knowledge that humans only dream of. But some of your machines could be even better if combined with Earth systems." The queen raised a brow. "You believe you can improve our technology?" "Not alone," he said quickly. "But maybe together. Humans see problems differently. We had to survive with less, so we found strange ways to make things work." He spoke with quiet excitement, explaining how human engineers used recycled materials, or how they combined old tools with new ones. The queen listened, intrigued by his creative thinking. When the conversation ended, Elira said, "Perhaps the court was wrong about you, Mark of Earth." "Perhaps," he said gently. "But that's all right. People change their minds when they see something real." Over the next few months, Mark continued to earn respect in small but steady ways. He helped stabilize the palace's energy grid when a crystal fault caused short circuits. He worked with young alien scientists who admired his patience. He never bragged or demanded recognition. Word began to spread beyond the palace walls. Some of the Valoran citizens spoke kindly of the quiet human who repaired the queen's fountain, or the man who made the power grid safer. Slowly, public curiosity replaced doubt. But not everyone liked this change. Lord Varen grew more bitter. "The human is winning their hearts," he whispered to the other nobles. "If this continues, he will influence the throne." Varen decided to test the human in a more dangerous way. One afternoon, while Mark was visiting the palace laboratory, an emergency alarm echoed through the corridors. The energy field around the lower city had begun to collapse, a fault in the planetary shield that protected Valoran from radiation storms. The scientists panicked. Repairing the system required deep technical skill, and only the chief engineer knew how to handle it. But the engineer was trapped inside the malfunctioning energy chamber. Mark stepped forward immediately. "Show me the system layout," he said. The scientists hesitated. "You can't. This is advanced Valoran tech." "Technology follows logic," Mark said calmly. "Let me see it." Within minutes, he studied the holographic display, his mind moving quickly. The problem was clear. An energy surge had reversed the crystal polarity, trapping the engineer and threatening to destroy the shield. "I need access to the control console," he said. A few workers looked to each other uncertainly, but his calm voice gave them courage. Together they followed his instructions. Mark adjusted power nodes, redirected flow circuits, and applied human engineering logic that the aliens had never considered. After several tense minutes, the main console beeped and the shield stabilized. The energy flow returned to normal. The trapped engineer stumbled out safely and the alarm fell silent. The aliens looked at Mark in awe. One whispered, "He saved the city section." Mark smiled faintly. "Just a lucky guess," he said. When the Queen arrived moments later, the technicians bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," said the chief scientist, "the human saved us. Without him, the shield would have failed." Elira turned to Mark, her eyes bright with surprise. "You repaired the planetary shield?" He shrugged lightly. "Just patched it. It still needs a full check." The Queen looked at him silently for a moment. There was no pride in his tone, only sincerity. "You continue to surprise me, Mark of Earth," he smiled. "I hope that's a good thing." She looked at him for a long while before answering softly, "It is." That night, as the city lights shimmered beneath the twin moons, the Queen stood on her balcony, thinking about the man from Earth. He had come without weapons or wealth, yet he had already changed how her people saw humanity. She had once thought humans were fragile, unfit for the challenges of the galaxy. But the more she saw, the more she realized that their greatest strength was invisible. It was the calm persistence that refused to break, even under pressure. Somewhere below, in the quiet rooms of the palace, Mark was studying Valoran systems again, trying to learn more, trying to help more, and for the first time in years, the Queen of Valoran felt not just curiosity but admiration. The sun of Valoran had been shining brighter than usual for several days. Scientists said it was only a minor fluctuation, something that happened every few centuries. No one paid much attention until the sky turned crimson. Mark was in the palace workshop when the alarms began to scream. He looked up at the ceiling as the light panels flickered. A technician ran in, his face pale and eyes wide. "The solar field is collapsing," he shouted. "The upper atmosphere is charging with ion energy. It's forming a planet-wide storm." Mark dropped his tools and hurried out. In the corridors, the calm palace had turned into a scene of panic. Guards rushed toward the defense center. Servants fled to the lower shelters, and the sound of distant thunder shook the air. Through the tall glass windows, Mark saw enormous arcs of light streaking across the sky, painting it with violent red and gold patterns. Queen Elira stood in the command chamber surrounded by scientists and military officers. A holographic map floated in the center, showing waves of energy crashing toward the planet. The shield that protected Valoran was already weakening. "Report," the Queen said firmly. "The outer field is unstable," replied the chief scientist. "We cannot control the crystal network. The radiation storm will reach the capital within an hour. Activate the secondary core," she ordered. "We tried," said another engineer. "The storm has disrupted the link. If we force the core online, it may destroy itself." Elira's eyes narrowed. "Then find another way." Mark entered the chamber quietly, listening. He could see the fear behind every face. Even the proud nobles looked uncertain. He stepped closer to the console and studied the data stream. "May I see the system model?" he asked softly. Some of the officers turned in surprise. "This is no time for human curiosity," one of them snapped, but the Queen raised her hand. "Show him," she said. Reluctantly, the scientist opened the model. Holographic lines glowed around the room, complex circuits of energy crystals all pulsing unevenly. Mark frowned as he watched the flow. He had seen something like it before on Earth, during an old experiment involving magnetic storms and orbital stations. "You're using direct synchronization between crystal nodes," he said thoughtfully. "But when energy waves hit from space, the frequencies shift at random. You need a buffer, something flexible, not fixed." The scientists exchanged glances. "A flexible buffer? That's impossible. The Valoran network was built for precision." "Exactly," Mark said, "and that's the problem." He looked around, realizing time was running short. "Do you have any material that can change frequency quickly? Maybe a semi-organic conductor?" The Queen's voice was calm but urgent. "We have living circuits in the lower labs." "Good," Mark said. "We can use them to absorb the shock and redirect the flow before it overloads." "Can you do it?" Elira asked. "I can try," he said. She looked directly at him. "Then do it." Within minutes, Mark and a team of technicians rushed to the lower energy chamber. The walls vibrated with deep humming sounds as power surged through the network. Bright flashes filled the corridors, and the air smelled of hot metal. The living circuits were kept in transparent tubes, thin, glowing vines that pulsed with soft light. They were normally used for medical energy transfer, not planetary defense, but Mark believed they could work as a stabilizer. "Cut 10 meters of the main line," he instructed. "Connect the vine to both ends. It will balance the pulse automatically." The aliens hesitated, unsure. "That's never been tested." Mark's hands moved quickly. "If we wait to test it, the city will burn. Trust me." Something in his voice, calm but certain, made them obey. They followed his instructions, attaching the vines carefully. Sparks flew as the circuits linked together, and the room shook from another wave hitting the planet. On the monitors, the shield's color shifted from red to deep orange. "It was still unstable, but holding. It's working," shouted a technician. "Not enough," Mark said. "We need to connect at least 3 more lines to the outer grid. That will spread the load." Before anyone could answer, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. One of the main conduits exploded, releasing a burst of energy. The force threw Mark backward against the wall. Smoke filled the room and alarms wailed again. "Mark!" One of the engineers shouted. "I'm fine," he coughed, getting up. His left arm stung, but he ignored it. "Seal that break and finish the connection." Despite the chaos, his calm voice anchored them. They worked faster, attaching more living circuits. Slowly, the energy pattern stabilized, spreading evenly across the system. After several tense minutes, the vibrations began to fade. The red light on the monitors turned soft blue, the sign of equilibrium. The storm outside still raged, but the planetary shield no longer wavered. When the Queen arrived in the chamber, she saw Mark leaning against a console, exhausted but smiling faintly. "Report," she said. "The shield holds," replied the chief scientist. "The human's method. It saved us." The Queen turned to Mark. "You did this?" He nodded weakly. "We all did. It just needed a small change." There was no arrogance in his voice, only quiet satisfaction. The nobles who had doubted him stood silent. None could deny what they had seen. Hours later, when the storm finally passed and calm returned, Queen Illyra visited Mark in the medical wing. He sat on the bed with his arm bandaged, staring at the glowing skyline outside. "You should rest," she said softly. "I will," he replied, smiling. "Just wanted to see the stars again." She stood beside him, looking at the night sky through the glass wall. The twin moons were rising, painting the city in silver light. "You risked your life today," she said. "You could have waited for others." "If I had waited," he said gently, "we might not be standing here now." For a long moment, they were silent. Then she asked, "How did you know what to do?" He thought for a moment before answering. "On Earth, storms are common. We can't control them, so we learn to bend with them. Your system tried to fight the storm's energy, but it needed to bend too." The Queen looked at him quietly. "You saw what my scientists could not." "I just looked differently," he said. "Sometimes the answer is not in strength, but in flexibility." Her gaze softened. "You speak of strength as if it is something gentle." "Sometimes it is," he said with a small smile. "Gentle things last longer." Those words stayed with her. She had lived among warriors and leaders who believed only power could protect their world. Yet this human, fragile in body and simple in manner, had saved her people with patience and understanding. The next day, the Queen called a public address from the palace balcony. Thousands gathered in the shining city square below. The air was fresh again and the skies clear. She stood beside Mark, her silver robe fluttering in the wind. "Citizens of Valoran," she said, her voice carrying through the air. "Yesterday our world faced destruction. Our shields failed, our systems faltered. But we were saved, not by weapons or might, but by wisdom. A man from a distant world gave us a lesson we will not forget." The crowd murmured, looking up at the small human standing next to her. "He showed us," the Queen continued, "that true strength is not in dominance but in understanding. It is in the courage to act when others fear, and the heart to keep calm when chaos surrounds us." For a moment there was silence. Then the people began to cheer. It started softly and then rose like a wave through the city. "Peace to the Queen. Peace to the human." Voices echoed together. Mark stood quietly, feeling both shy and grateful. He looked at the Queen, who gave him a rare smile. That evening, after the celebration ended, Illyra found him again in the observatory. "Your people must be proud of you," she said. I just did what anyone should do, he answered. She looked at him thoughtfully. You are different from the leaders I have known. You do not seek power, he laughed softly. Power never lasts. But kindness, sometimes it changes everything. The Queen turned toward the stars. You've changed more than you realize, Mark of Earth. You've changed me. He looked at her, unsure what to say. The wind moved gently through the open observatory, and for the first time since their marriage, silence between them felt warm, not distant. Far beyond the planet, satellites recorded the remains of the great storm. Its data would be studied for generations. But among the people of Valoran, a new story began to spread. A story about a quiet human who saved their world with intelligence and calm heart. And in the royal palace, the Queen often found herself wondering what other hidden strengths this man from Earth still carried within him. The days after the storm passed quietly at first, but the memory of it lingered in every corner of Valoran. Citizens whispered about the human who had saved their planet. Nobles still murmured among themselves, but even the most critical eyes could not ignore the results. Mark Hale, the man from Earth, had proven himself in ways no one had imagined. Mark, however, did not change. He rose each morning at sunrise, walking through the palace corridors, checking on ongoing repairs and visiting engineers and technicians. The Queen often followed from a distance, quietly observing. One morning, Mark entered the main engineering hall to find chaos. Alien workers struggled to calibrate the energy converters that powered the city's upper sectors. Sparks flew and the machines hummed erratically. A young apprentice was nearly overwhelmed by the intense energy pulses. Step back, Mark said calmly. He did not shout or demand authority. His voice, steady and clear, made everyone pause. He moved forward, studying the machinery. His fingers traced the complex conduits as he explained what was wrong. The energy input is too fast for the converters, he said. You need a buffer that can adjust automatically. Then it will run smoothly. The apprentices and engineers listened carefully, surprised by the clarity of his directions. Within moments, they implemented his changes. The hum of the machinery softened into a smooth, controlled rhythm. The young apprentice looked at him in awe. You fixed it, said one of the senior engineers. No, Mark said simply. I showed it a better way. It already had the ability, it just needed guidance. Queen Elira watched silently from the balcony above. Even after months, she could not fully understand how this human could handle machines and systems she had always considered untouchable by outsiders. And yet he did not boast. He simply worked calmly and efficiently, helping wherever he could. Word of Mark's deeds spread quickly. By midday, the nobles who had doubted him began to realize something important. His strength was not in muscle or status. It was in his mind, his patience, and his ability to inspire others. Where Valoran society had relied on strict hierarchy, Mark relied on collaboration and trust. One noble, Lady Tareen, approached the Queen privately. Your Majesty, she said, her voice low. I must admit I misjudged him. This human, he has a presence that cannot be ignored. Even our best scholars and engineers follow him willingly. Elira nodded, her eyes still on Mark. Yes, she said quietly, but there is more than skill in his actions. There is character. Tareen looked surprised. Character? Do you mean, like courage? Not courage as we know it, the Queen said thoughtfully. Courage tempered with calm. Strength that does not need to prove itself. That is the kind of power humans have, and he embodies it fully. That evening, a challenge arose that would test Mark in ways no one anticipated. A shipment of advanced crystals, meant to stabilize the city's outer energy shield, arrived damaged. The delivery drones had been caught in a minor energy surge and several crystals were fractured. Without them, parts of the city could not maintain power, and citizens would experience blackouts for weeks. The Palace Council was in panic. We need to quarantine the crystals, one advisor said. No one can touch them until a solution is found. Mark walked calmly to the room. Let me see them, he said. The council protested. They are unstable. They might explode. I will take the risk, he replied. We have no choice if we want to restore power quickly. He studied the crystals carefully, analyzing each fracture. Then he spoke calmly to the engineers, showing them how to use stabilizing energy fields to temporarily mend the cracks. Do not force them, he instructed. Let them adapt naturally. They will respond if we guide them correctly. For several hours, Mark worked side by side with Valoran engineers. They adjusted their machines to follow his directions, their trust in him growing with every success. By nightfall, all crystals were stabilized. The outer shield returned to full power, and the city lights shone brighter than they had in weeks. When the Queen entered the hall, the engineers bowed. "Your Majesty," one said, "the human has saved the city again." Elira's eyes met Mark's, filled with admiration and something deeper she could not name. "You did more than that," she said softly. "You have shown my people what true strength looks like." Mark smiled faintly. "I just showed what humans can do when they work together." Her lips curved into a small smile. "Then you have shown me as well." Over the next few weeks, Mark's influence grew steadily. He worked with scholars to improve energy efficiency in the city, introduced new teaching methods for young engineers, and encouraged collaboration between different alien colonies. His quiet leadership inspired respect across the empire, not because he demanded it, but because he earned it through action and thought. One afternoon, the Queen decided to test his abilities further. She invited him to the Royal Training Hall, a place where the Valoran warriors practiced their physical and mental skills. "Mark," she said, "your intelligence and calm have already changed my court, but I want to see another side of you. Come with me." Mark followed willingly. The hall was enormous, with high ceilings and advanced training equipment. The Queen gestured to the apparatus. "Here we test strength and endurance. You may not have our physical advantages, but perhaps you can show me something else." Mark observed silently. He watched the warriors leap, lift, and balance on equipment that no human had attempted before. Then he stepped forward. Instead of trying to match their strength, he used his intelligence and adaptability. He analyzed the movement patterns, adjusted his footing, and applied human techniques of balance and timing. To the astonishment of the warriors, Mark completed the course using precision, calculation, and mental focus. He moved efficiently, never rushing, always aware of the rhythm and energy around him. By the end, he had finished in record time, not because he was stronger, but because he was smarter, calmer, and more adaptable. The Queen watched silently. The entire hall was quiet. Finally, she spoke. "You are unlike any human I have ever imagined. Your strength, it is in your mind and your patience. It is something my people have rarely seen." Mark bowed slightly. "Strength takes many forms. Sometimes the quietest forms are the strongest." The next day, Mark continued to influence the empire in small, meaningful ways. He began mentoring young engineers and soldiers, teaching them not only science but also the importance of observation, patience, and careful decision-making. Even the Queen joined some of these sessions, observing his teaching methods. One student, a young alien named Raylan, asked him, "Why do humans do things so differently?" Mark smiled. "Because we had to. On Earth, we faced danger every day, but we could not fight everything. We learned to survive by thinking, by watching, by working together." Raylan looked at him with wide eyes. "Then your strength is your mind?" Mark shook his head. "It is more than that. It is the will to keep trying, even when everyone else doubts you. That is something every human carries, and perhaps every person can learn." The Queen, observing from a distance, felt a deep sense of admiration. She had fought many battles, faced countless threats, and led her people with discipline and authority. Yet she realized that the human at her side had taught her a different kind of leadership, one that was not born from fear or power, but from patience, wisdom, and quiet resilience. That evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, Elira stood beside Mark on the balcony. The city below shimmered in peaceful light, the recent storm now a memory of what could have been disaster. "You have changed my world," she said softly. "I just helped where I could," Mark replied. "Your people did most of the work." "No," she said firmly. "You have shown them something they could not see in themselves, and you have shown me something I did not understand before. Humans are strong in ways my people rarely imagine." He looked at her quietly, unsure what to say. She did not need words. The respect in her gaze spoke volumes. "You will continue to teach them, won't you?" she asked. "I will," he said. "But I will also learn. Your world has much to offer, and I want to understand it fully." The Queen nodded, feeling a sense of hope she had not felt in years. She realized that by marrying Mark, she had not only gained peace for her empire, but also insight into a strength she had never known. And as the moons cast silver light across the palace, Both human and alien stood side by side, ready to face the future together, a future that would be brighter for the quiet, unassuming strength of a human who had proven that true power is often invisible to the eye. The weeks following the storm were filled with calm yet meaningful activity in Valoran. Mark continued his work among engineers, scientists, and students, but his presence began to influence the entire empire. People started to adopt his methods of observation, patience, and collaboration. Even warriors began to approach problems with careful strategy, instead of relying only on brute strength. The queen watched all of this with quiet fascination. She had expected a human to be fragile, unable to keep up with the grandeur and rigor of her world. Instead, she saw a being whose quiet presence reshaped minds, inspired trust, and revealed strength where others had overlooked it. One morning, the queen asked Mark to join her in the palace garden. Silver fountains flowed gently, and floating blossoms glimmered in the sunlight. The air smelled faintly of energy crystal, a scent unique to Valoran. "Mark," she said, "your work has touched every corner of my empire. My people respect you, perhaps more than I ever imagined they could respect a human. Tell me, how do you do it?" Mark smiled, brushing a hand over a low crystal bush. "I don't try to impress," he said. "I only try to understand. When you understand a problem or a person, you can help in the right way, and sometimes that makes more difference than any display of strength." Elira studied him. "You've shown us what strength truly is. It is not in weapons or dominance, but in endurance, patience, and quiet action. You are extraordinary." "I'm just one human," he said softly. "But humans are stronger than many give them credit for. We survive, we adapt, we find ways to overcome even when the odds seem impossible." She nodded, letting the words sink in. The queen had ruled for decades, yet she realized she had never truly understood the quiet resilience of humans until now. That afternoon, a delegation arrived from a neighboring planet seeking alliance. They were powerful, proud, and skeptical of humans. They demanded to meet the human who had saved Valoran from the storm, expecting perhaps a minor role or token honor. Mark greeted them calmly, bowing with polite respect. "Welcome," he said. "I am happy to share what I can of our knowledge." The delegates were surprised by his composure. One of them, a tall alien with golden scales, asked, "Why should we trust a species so small and fragile?" Mark did not flinch. "Because we think differently," he said. "We find solutions where others see problems. We survive challenges that seem impossible, and we work together when it matters most." The delegation was silent. They could not argue with his record. The human had saved a planet, repaired systems that their best engineers had struggled with, and inspired an empire. Slowly they began to nod, their skepticism giving way to respect. Queen Elira watched proudly. She realized that Mark's strength was not only practical, it was an example that inspired others to rise to their best selves. Later, the queen took him to the royal observatory, a place few visitors were allowed. The view was breathtaking. Twin moons, floating cities, rivers of glowing energy. "You have changed the heart of my empire," she said. "And yet you remain humble. How do you do it?" "I don't think about recognition," he said. "I only think about what needs to be done. If you focus on what is important, people notice without you asking." She smiled softly. "You remind me that true power is not always visible. My people follow you, not because they fear you, but because they trust you. That is the strength I never fully understood before." Mark looked out over the city. Trust is built slowly. Actions matter more than words or appearances. That is how humans survive. Elira realized that he was teaching her as much as he was teaching the empire. She had thought strength was measured by control, force, or authority. But Mark showed her that courage could be quiet, patience could be powerful, and intelligence could outweigh brute strength. A week later, the queen arranged a ceremony to honor the humans' contributions. The great hall was filled with citizens, scholars, engineers, and soldiers. Everyone had heard the story of how Mark saved Valoran from the storm, repaired the city systems, and inspired its people. When he entered the hall, the crowd went silent, and then erupted into applause. They cheered not for a display of power, but for the courage, wisdom, and determination he had shown. The queen watched quietly, her heart swelling with admiration. "Mark Hale," she said, stepping forward, "you came from a distant world, not as a warrior, not as a ruler, but as a human with a mind, a heart, and a spirit that could not be broken. You have shown my people and me the true meaning of strength. For that we are all grateful." Mark bowed humbly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only did what I could, but I'm grateful for your trust and your people's support." The crowd cheered again. But in that moment, the Queen realized that the human's true gift was not the fixes he made or the systems he repaired. It was the way he inspired others to be their best, to rise above fear, and to find courage within themselves. After the ceremony, the Queen led Mark to the palace balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons reflected off the crystal towers, painting everything in soft silver light. "You have taught us much," she said. "My people now see humanity differently, and I have learned what it means to be truly strong." Mark looked at her, his eyes calm. "Strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is patience, and sometimes it is the courage to act when no one else can." She nodded. "You have shown me that strength is not only physical, it is moral, it is mental. It is the will to keep going even when all seems lost." He smiled faintly. "That is what humans carry. It is not flashy, but it lasts. And maybe other races can learn from it too." Illyra looked at him closely. "They already have, and so have I." Days turned into months, and life in Valoran settled into a new rhythm. The Queen and Mark continued their work side by side. The Empire flourished under this partnership, blending alien technology with human innovation. The citizens respected the Queen more than ever, inspired by the human who had changed the Empire without raising a hand in anger. Mark continued to teach and learn, always quietly observing, always helping. He never sought praise or reward, yet his influence spread further than anyone had expected. Engineers shared his methods across colonies. Scholars studied his strategies. Even warriors adapted some of his techniques for focus and patience. Through it all, the Queen stood by his side, her admiration deepening every day. She realized that she had married not a fragile human, but a being whose mind, courage, and quiet resilience could rival any alien strength. One evening, the Queen finally spoke her thoughts aloud. She had summoned Mark to the observatory, the city lights shimmering below. "Mark," she said softly, "when I agreed to this marriage, I thought I understood humans. I thought you were fragile and unprepared for the challenges of this empire." "I was wrong," Mark smiled gently. "I hope I have done well enough to change your view." "You have done more than that," she said, looking at him with a mixture of respect and warmth. "You have taught me that true strength is not measured by power alone, but by persistence, patience, and the courage to act wisely. You have shown me that humans, though physically fragile, can achieve greatness in ways even we could not imagine." He looked down humbly. "I only did what I could. The rest comes from cooperation and trust." The Queen placed a hand on his. "Perhaps. But you were the spark that lit the fire of understanding. You showed my people and me that we can rise higher when we work together. That is the real power you possess." Mark's eyes reflected the silver moonlight. "Then perhaps the universe is stronger than it seems if we are willing to learn from each other." Illyra nodded slowly. "Yes, and I am proud to have learned from you." From that day on, the story of Mark Hale spread throughout the galaxy, not because he wielded a weapon or conquered lands, but because he demonstrated a strength unseen by most, the courage of the mind, the endurance of the spirit, and the power of hope. In Valoran, the Queen often told her council, "We have learned that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest, gentlest strength is the one that changes everything." Mark continued to live in the palace, teaching, learning, and guiding, but he remained humble, never boasting, never seeking reward. And the Queen, once doubtful, now stood beside him not only as a partner but as a witness to the extraordinary capabilities of humanity. Under twin moons and glowing skies, the Empire of Valoran thrived. And at its heart was a quiet, unassuming human who had shown that true strength is not in the body, but in the mind, the heart, and the will to act when it matters most. Together, they led their worlds toward a future where strength was measured not by fear or dominance but by wisdom, resilience, and hope.